Hi everyone. So I was casually browsing through PragerU's catalog of enlightening 5-minute videos, as I regularly do of course, and I stumbled upon one of their most recent videos, titled, "Do We Have to Destroy the Environment to Save It?" The title was interesting because I know the background of PragerU, so I decided to give it a go. What I got was the most laughably disingenuous video by PragerU that I've ever seen. I know that may sound redundant, considering this is PragerU we're talking about, but honestly, I've watched so many of their videos and this one might top it. Despite being only 5 minutes long, there's so much dishonesty and bad faith acting packed into this video that I've had to watch it a few different times just to actually believe what I'm hearing. The video is about renewable energy and its harmful effects on the environment, and, well, the video just explains itself the best.
Do we need to destroy the environment to save it? That's the question I faced a few years ago. I co-founded a movement that was the precursor to the Green New Deal. It was called the New Apollo Project. If we could send a man to the moon, we reasoned, surely we could save our own planet. All we had to do was harness the power of the wind and the sun and get rid of fossil fuels. Compared to the original Apollo mission, how hard could that be? Well, it turned out to be very hard, practically impossible, in fact. The basic laws of physics and chemistry proved to be very stubborn. But as I did more and more research, something else began to trouble me. The prospect that pushing the planet toward wind and solar energy would actually cause more harm to the environment than good.
So the first assertion they make here is that renewable energy does more harm than good. Let's keep in mind that renewable energy has the potential to reverse climate change, which is most likely going to be catastrophic for the entire human race, cause many species of animals to go extinct, and will cause tens of millions to die. So what could possibly be worse than that? What negative could renewable energy pose that could possibly outweigh the continuation of the world as we know it? Well, let's see what PragerU has to say.
There's no better example of this than what wind and solar energy do to birds. Industrial wind turbines, those giant generators of wind power, are the greatest new threat to golden and bald eagles. But the eagles are hardly the only ones threatened. Condors, owls, hawks, and falcons all fall prey to the turbine's mighty blades.
Birds. Yes, birds. The birds that fly into the wind turbines and die every year is their silver bullet. Keep in mind that the speaker, Michael, prefaced this point with the idea that this is the best example for why renewable energy does more harm than good. I'm sorry, but really? This is the best example? This is the example that they're going with? There's going to be irreversible damage done to the Earth, destroying millions of lives and ecosystems, and the fact that birds being killed by wind turbines is the best example for why renewable energy does more harm than good? This point about birds doesn't even work. Yes, hundreds of thousands of birds are killed every year by wind turbines. However, according to the avian and wildlife costs of fossil fuels and nuclear power, a study by Benjamin K. Sovakal, over 24 million birds per year were killed by fossil fuels when factoring in climate change as a cause of death. At this point, if you're unfamiliar with PragerU, you might be wondering, well, if they care about birds so much, why don't they do a video on the harmful effects that fossil fuels have on birds? And I'll get to that question in a bit, but if you know nearly anything about PragerU, you probably know why. Anyways, I'm sure that you don't need me to tell you why that this point is ridiculous, and that birds dying to wind turbines is not comparable to the good that renewable energy can bring. But, I'll explain anyways. Firstly, and obviously, renewable energy has the potential to slow down and even reverse global warming. Secondly, there is no risk of any gas leak or oil leak that destroys ecosystems within days unlike fossil fuels. Renewable energy has the potential to be developed much further and to be utilized to a more efficient extent than fossil fuels, which are much more limited in terms of growth or optimization. They're good for diversifying energy usage, and renewable energy provides a number of growing jobs in the industry every year. I could go on, but I'm sure you understand the point. Let's get back to the video.
Big wind, and believe me, there's a big wind industry now, just like there's big oil and big pharma, claims that house cats kill more birds than wind turbines. That's true, but whereas cats kill small, common birds like sparrows, wind turbines kill big, threatened with extinction and slow to reproduce species like bald eagles and condors. Indeed, industrial wind farms are killing fields for birds. The more turbines you put up, the more birds you're going to slaughter. According to the American Bird Conservancy in 2017, research shows that hundreds of thousands of birds and bats die every year when they accidentally collide with the turbine blades. That number grows with each turbine built. The Royal Society for the Preservation of Birds reports that wind farms built off the coast of Britain could be the final nail in the coffin for endangered seabirds. The Center for Biological Diversity calls the Altamont Pass wind farm in California a population sink for golden eagles as well as burrowing owls. As for solar farms, they produce an entirely different set of problems, although they also are very harmful for birds. In California, according to a federal report, massive solar arrays produce heat up to 900 degrees. When birds fly into those arrays, they simply burn up. Building a solar farm is a lot like building any other kind of massive industrial facility. You have to clear the whole area of wildlife. For example, in order to construct the Ivanpah Solar Farm in California near the Nevada border, developers hired biologists to pull threatened desert tortoises from their burrows. The tortoises were then loaded on the back of pickup trucks and caged in pens, where many ended up dying. Solar farms also need millions and millions of gallons of water to clean the mirrors and to generate power. Since most solar farms are built in the desert, we're talking about a precious resource already in short supply. When push comes to shove, water could become the real throttle on renewable solar energy, according to Michael Weber, professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Texas at Austin.
So there's a lot to address here. He brings up more examples of turtles and birds being killed, and to be clear, I don't think that it's a good thing that animals of any kind are being killed. Obviously, I don't want that to happen. I mean, I'm gonna pull up my vegan card here and say, of course, I don't like when animals are killed. However, when looking at something like this, we have to look at the lesser evil, which obviously isn't the ideal option. However, it's the reality of the world that we live in. And we've already established that their point on birds pales in comparison to the good that renewable energy provides, and that in fact, fossil fuels and their impact on the environment kill more birds than wind turbines. So let's move on to their point about solar energy and water. His point about solar panels taking up millions of gallons of water is true, and might sound like a lot, until you realize that one fracking well uses 9.6 million gallons of water per year, which is 28 times more water than they used 15 years ago, according to scientificamerican.com. And that number is only growing as it becomes less and less efficient to get fossil fuels from wells as they dry up. So yes, of course, solar panels need water to be cleaned, and yeah, they need a lot. But still, it really makes you wonder why PragerU keeps on going after renewable energy when the biggest culprits of what they're accusing renewable energy for doing is the fossil fuel industry. Anyways, let's finish up the video.
Then there's the issue of what to do with solar panels that wear out. The panels contain lead and other toxic chemicals that can't be removed without breaking up the entire panel. Since it's far cheaper for solar manufacturers to just buy the raw materials than recycle old panels, those old panels end up in landfills, or as the New York Times discovered in a 2019 investigation, dumped in poor African nations. Wind turbines may have an even worse disposal problem than solar panels. First, they are gigantic. A single blade can be longer than a wing on a jumbo jet. Second, they're made of fiberglass, which has to be cut by a diamond-studded saw to be carted away on giant trucks. And as with solar panels, the only thing to do is bury them, toxic materials and all. This is done, as you can imagine, in enormous pits, creating yet another landfill problem. All this environmental degradation is happening on a relatively small scale right now because we get less than 10% of our electricity from wind and solar sources. If we were really to embark on a wind and solar build-out of the kind environmentalists advocate, the damage would be much, much greater. Consider this. Today's energy system requires just 0.5% of the land in the US. If we were to get all the energy we now use from wind and solar, at least 25% of all land in the US would be required. That's a lot of dead wildlife. Doesn't sound very green, does it? I'm Michael Schellenberger, founder and president of Environmental Progress and author of Apocalypse Never for Prager University.
So, firstly, I agree. It's not great that solar panels end up in landfills. However, solar panels are made out of some of the most widely recyclable materials, such as silicon, plastic, and aluminum. This is what I meant earlier when I mentioned that renewable energy has so much more room to grow. Governments could provide subsidies and incentives to businesses that recycle their solar panels, or tax businesses that simply throw away instead of renewing, reusing, or recycling them. However, those types of opportunities for harm or waste reduction simply don't exist within the fossil fuel industry. Moving on to his next point about the dismantling of wind turbines, again, of course, it's not a perfect system, but it's so weird to me that out of all the things, he would point at wind turbines and how difficult they are to dismantle and just completely ignore oil rigs. Oil rigs are extremely hard to dismantle, and some companies don't even know how they're going to do it yet. The entirety of the structure must be removed from the water so it doesn't destroy any ecosystems or reefs. Oil rigs are absolutely massive. The top half of them including drills, helicopter pads, crew quarters, processing facilities, and struts and walkways allowing the crew to move around. While the lower half of the rig, the part that's submerged in water, most of the time includes an entire concrete foundation, or, alternatively, gigantic steel legs with a steel frame. Duncan Manning at Shell states that their structures weigh 300,000 tons, which is roughly the same size as the Empire State Building. There are a few different methods, but the main method so far is by installing a huge crane floating next to the rig and plucking up the top side of the platform and onto the shore. And while these methods exist, much of the technology just isn't there yet to completely and effectively dismantle these massive rigs. I think you get the point, so let's move on to the next idea that he makes. When he states that over 25% of our land will be given up if we wanted to produce purely renewable energy, he's conveniently leaving out the impact of hydroelectric power and dams, which make up another 8 or 9% of our energy, and if I might add, have a lifespan of 50 years while oil rigs and fracking wells get about 30 on average. He also ignores nuclear energy, which makes up a much more substantial 30% of energy in the United States. Also, I don't think anyone honestly believes that we should just get rid of all fossil fuels right this instant, as that's not really like a viable option right now. The much more realistic idea is that we slowly increase the percentage of energy that we get from renewable sources, while increase the percentage of energy we get from nuclear power, while reducing fossil fuels' impact. And of course, nuclear energy provides waste and it has its own issues along with everything else. But it's a much more environmentally friendly option than fossil fuels and will provide an abundance of energy while we innovate more efficient ways to utilize renewable energy so we can sustain entirely off of it eventually. Now that that's out of the way, let's circle back to the question that I highlighted before. So why doesn't PragerU make a video on fossil fuels and its effects on the environment if they care so much as to make a video about it attacking renewable energy? Well, if you don't know, and it's pretty common knowledge, PragerU, of course, was founded by Dennis Prager. However, it's been funded by literal fracking billionaires, Dan and Ferris Wilks. Therefore, PragerU has an implicit bias and a vested interest in protecting the fossil fuel industry. And once you have that knowledge, this video becomes all the more laughable when you understand why they would attack renewable energy for something that fossil fuels do hundreds of times over. Anyways, that concludes their video, and thus concludes mine. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must get back to watching more PragerU videos so I can learn how to better pull myself up by the bootstraps and, stop being poor. Thanks.